Hi guys! It's been a while since I've shot any footage here aboard Obelix. If you're new to my channel, this is the sailboat I live aboard with my Icelandic sheepdog named Jökull. That's this little guy right here. We've just gotten back from our usual morning walk and that takes about an hour, so that's why he looks a little bit tired. While living aboard Obelix, I spend most of my free time fixing up my slightly newer, slightly bigger sailboat named Athena. I'm going to head over to Athena in just a few minutes, but before I do that, I thought I'd share with you a couple of the bigger items on my to-do list for this weekend. Those items are in all likelihood going to make up the bulk of this video. If you've seen the video from last weekend, I'm sure you can guess what this is. If you haven't seen that video, this is a 22-inch computer monitor that I'll mount above the chat table aboard Athena. This showed up yesterday, which is fortunate because it was just in time. I need this to continue where I left off last weekend. I'm hoping I'll have time to open this. Although from looking at the packaging you wouldn't know it, this actually contains something that's pretty dang cool. It's a single board computer that runs Windows 10. It has a built-in Arduino and a small 7-inch touchscreen. Hopefully we'll get back to this a little later in the video. Last but definitely not least, at some point during this weekend, I'll need to dig out the sails for Obelix. They're buried deep within my storage unit and it's going to be a real challenge getting them out. Why do I need the sails? Well, because in about 4 weeks I'll move to a different marina. Although there is one small challenge. The temperatures outside lately have been kind of low, so there's lots and lots of ice. That is way too thick for me to sail through. Luckily, the ever-knowing weather service has proclaimed warmer temperatures in about a week from today. So, fingers crossed. Now, let's head over to Athena and get some work done. Those of you who saw the video from last weekend will know that I've got a lot on my plate right now with the move, my new job, and also because my much beloved old Skoda, that was my old car, decided to die on me. So I needed to find a new car also. Well, yesterday I was able to cross that last item off my to-do list. Hopefully this Hyundai i20 will prove a reliable car. Here we've got Athena. This is where I'd normally start off the video, but seeing as I've already done that, and that it's colder than a well digger's ass out here, why don't we just hurry on up? The temperature is only just below freezing, but the wind is straight out of the east, and it feels like it's coming straight out of Russia. Oh, that is so much better. I swung by the boat yesterday and turned on my small kerosene heater, so it's a nice toasty 15 degrees Celsius in here. Why don't we start by unwrapping this, just to make absolutely sure that this is in fact what I ordered. That looks about right. This is not a fancy monitor. It's just a standard IPS panel with LED backlighting and a 1080p resolution. On the upside, this cost next to nothing. My reasons for choosing this exact monitor are a little bit unusual. I chose this because it has a completely flat back. That'll make it easier for me to mount this so that it doesn't protrude too far out from the locker. I was planning on using a monitor that was a lot better than this one, but I figured until I'm absolutely sure that I'll be editing video at the chat table, I better just save that money and make do with a little bit less expensive monitor. Because the back of that monitor is completely flat, it's going to be really easy for me to mount it so that it doesn't protrude out further than that from the locker. But the next monitor I decide to put up in there might not have that feature, so while I have the chance, I'm just gonna adjust the size of my locker a little bit. I figure if I take off about 5 centimeters, that should leave room for even the beefiest of monitors. It may have looked like I wasn't super accurate on that last cut, but that's because I didn't have to be. Because of the way the Warrior 38 is constructed, the outer veneer piece of plywood on the bulkheads have a slightly wavy texture to them. And I've just gone ahead and transferred the curvature of those waves onto this piece of plywood. This cut, the one I'm about to make now, has to be accurate. I've gone ahead and put the pieces of the locker up, and if you saw the video from last weekend, then this will look awfully familiar, because this is exactly where I got to last weekend. Everything is the exact same as last weekend, of course, except the fact that the locker here is now 5 centimeters less deep. As you might just barely be able to see, the old locker protruded out to here. I've just done a quick test with all of my electrical panels, and they seem to fit. I figured I'd better just check with the screen before I move on, just to make sure. That looks pretty good. Next step is to make some templates for the plywood. Come to think of it, I've actually already got the first piece of the template. That's this white bit here. I built that last weekend, so I might as well just use that to grab some rough measurements and then cut this bottom piece out of plywood. Whenever you're building a template, it's always easier to have something that's a little rigid instead of it all just being stuff that's flapping around in the breeze. I've gone ahead and lined everything up so that I can open the chart table without that interfering with the locker. And I've given myself about 3.5 centimeters worth of clearance here. Let's go ahead and grab some measurements so that I can cut that piece of plywood. So it's going to be 50 centimeters long, minus this bit here because that will go on the outside, so that's 1.2 centimeters, so that's 48.8. And as far as the depth, over here it is 22 minus the 1.5 because 1.2, sorry, because that will go on the outside, so that's 20.8. And this is 15.5, that's 14.3, and a measurement in the middle just to rough it out. So that is 20.5 minus 1.2, that's 19.3. I've transferred the measurements onto this piece of plywood here. Let's go ahead and get this cut and see how well it fits. That looks like a reasonably good fit. Let's just do a quick test of the clearance between the chart table and the bottom piece over here, just to make absolutely sure I haven't messed something up. Yep, perfect. In this corner over here, I'll have to have some kind of support because this bottom piece over here is only really secured on 2 sides right now, and that's not enough. So I'll have to have something coming down from up here to help lift this bit here. Something along the lines of this. I've gone ahead and secured this bit with a couple of screws that go up into the sandwich construction of the deck. This was how the original locker was held together. To secure the bottom end of this to the bottom of the locker, I'll use a tiny bit of mahogany, and that piece needs to be 46 centimeters. This is 46 centimeters. I've gone ahead and transferred the angle between this piece and the bottom piece onto this so that I can plane this into shape. Perfect. It took about an hour and a lot of trial and error, but I've put together the frame for the extension to the locker over here. But wait, there's more. It floats. Basically, all that's left for me to do now is to cut a piece of plywood that'll sit here and another piece for over here. And then you should be able to get a pretty good idea of what this is going to look like once it's done. This is at a bit of an angle, so I think I'll just make a quick template here so that I don't waste any plywood. Normally I use a bit of cardboard to make these templates, but this time I decided to try this corrugated plastic stuff, and this stuff is horrible. It's much better just to use cardboard because this stuff is kind of difficult to cut accurately. It's easy enough when you're cutting in the right direction like this, but if you need to go at a bit of an angle, it gets really difficult. Definitely not worth it. It's much better just to stick with cardboard. Yep, it's close enough for me to transfer this onto some plywood. Well, it's close, but it's not perfect. I'll need to trim this. Thusly trimmed. That is much better. Now that this edge over here is good and the top is good, because that's going to get covered by headliner anyway, I can mark off the edge of this and then trim it to size. Perfect. I've just cut the final piece of plywood and I think it's gonna fit. Yep, that looks pretty good. I'm so glad I managed to cut all of the plywood for that locker. Tomorrow comes the interesting bit, which of course is trying to fit the panels and the computer monitor. But it's getting kind of late in the day, as you might be able to tell, so I need to head back to Obelix and take Jökull for his evening walk. But I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Good morning, guys. It's Sunday morning and there's been a small change of plans. A little later on today, around 10 o'clock, a friend of mine that's an electrician is going to swing by the boat. He's going to give me some guidance on where I should put the AC outlets. I figured he has a lot more experience making those kinds of decisions than I do, and I really value his input. However, I don't think he's too keen on being on camera. Long story short, I've got a little bit less time for a shooting video than I thought I'd have today, so I might have to wait until next weekend to show you that single board computer, but we'll see. Let's continue where I left off yesterday, in the portside aft cabin. Things are really starting to come together in here, I think. Last night, before heading back to Obelix, I put up the templates I've made a while back for the electrical panels, and this is just held in place with a bit of masking tape. Of course, I plan on putting a hinge on that, so why don't we start out by doing that? I've picked up a piano hinge, and all I really need to do is to cut this to size. I've just checked in there, and 50 centimeters seems to be a good length. In order to not cut the hinge in the middle of one of the pre-drilled holes, I'll have to take a little off the end and then go 50 centimeters from there, but that's no biggie. I've put a small piece of mahogany in here just to stiffen everything up, and then the hinge is gonna sit here. Now, I don't have any screws that are small enough, but fortunately the hardware store should open in about 12 minutes. While I'm waiting for the hardware store to open, I might as well go ahead and cut the hole for the monitor that's gonna sit here. I want to cut a hole in this piece of plywood that's big enough for this pokey bit that's poking out of the back of the monitor. By doing that, I can get the back of the monitor almost flush to this piece of plywood. I've transferred the measurements, so all I need to do now is to cross my fingers that this is correct and cut a big hole. Okay, fingers crossed. Yep, that looks like a good fit. My plan for mounting this screen is simply just to put a piece of plywood across here and then drill some holes through that correspond with the VESA mount, and then just use some M4 bolts to secure the screen to that piece of plywood. Speaking of the M4 bolts I need to secure that screen, that's another thing I don't have here aboard the boat, so I better head up to the hardware store. It's a few hours later now, and my friend the electrician has just left. I now have this plan for how many AC outlets I want here aboard the boat, but we'll get back to this in a later video. For now, let's get back to mounting the screen. I've cut a piece of plywood that will act as the mount for the screen, so I'll need to drill 4 holes in this that match these 4 holes. And the holes on the monitor are 75 millimeters apart. It looks like it's about 2.5 centimeters from the middle of this hole and to this edge here. I've drawn a line 2.5 centimeters from the bottom, so now it's just a matter of marking out the holes. I've drilled 4 holes, and the holes are just slightly bigger than the bolts I'll use, just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room to adjust the screen. I didn't really need to round over the edges, but rounding over edges makes things look better usually, so why not? Now let's go ahead and get this lined up. These bolts might be a little bit too long, but I can easily adjust that later on. Yep, I think that's gonna look pretty nice. I've put in a few screws just so that we could test the hinge. That looks perfect. To keep the locker closed, I've got one of these doohickeys here. I have no idea what these are called in English. I've put the monitor back on just to show you what this is going to look like once I'm done. There are a couple of things I'm going to have to change. For one, there is a bit of a lip over here I'll have to deal with. There's also a little bit of a gap over here I need to take care of. But this is more or less what the nav station is going to look like. I think it's pretty dang spiffy. Right now I've got the DC distribution panel up here and the AC distribution panel over here, and then the AC source select down here. And these might change position a little bit, but I think more or less this is going to be the final layout. I've still got plenty of room over here for one of those NMEA 2000 displays. I could even mount the VHF here, for instance, and I also have got a lot of room underneath here for mounting stuff. So I think this is a pretty good solution. In response to my last video, I got a lot of awesome feedback with ideas about how I could set up the nav station in there. I appreciate that feedback very much, and if you're one of those who submitted an idea, thank you so much. Now, if I didn't end up using your idea, it's not because there's anything wrong with your idea. This is just what I chose to go with. Sorry about the abrupt change of scenery, guys. I've just spent the last hour or so rummaging through my storage unit. The good news is I found the sails. I was planning on bringing you guys along with me up there because I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that I have in my storage unit, but I've yet again run out of time, so that'll have to wait for another video. I am way behind already, so I better head down and get busy editing. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and as always, feel free to leave a comment. See you!